you see that I am not Pastor Mark again. He has children showing at the state fair this weekend. Jerson had sheep that he earned a place at the state fair in, and Juliana, his daughter, had photography. So we wish them both luck in their endeavors, and we know that as a dad, he needed to be there with them this weekend.
Our first reading this morning is from Isaiah chapter 58, verses 9 through 14, and found on page 1153. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, Here I am. If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land, and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose water never fails. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the old foundations, and you will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. If you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath and from doing as you please on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the Lord's holy day honorable, and if you honor it by not going your own way and not doing as you please or speaking idle words, then you will find your joy in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride on the heights of the land and to feast on the inheritance of your father Jacob. The second reading is from Hebrews 12, verses 18 through 29, and found on page 1878. You have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm, to a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words that those who hear it beg that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I am trembling with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the heavenly Jerusalem, the city of the living God. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to those church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all men, to the spirits of righteous men made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? At that time his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptingly in reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. The word of the Lord.
Today's gospel reading is from the book of Luke, chapter 13, verses 10 through 17. On a Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues, and a woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. When Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to her, Woman, you are set free from your infirmity. Then he put his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God. Indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, the synagogue ruler said to the people, There are 6 days for work, so come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath. The Lord answered him, You hypocrites, doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, who Satan has kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from what bound her?" When he said this, all his opponents were humiliated, but the people were delighted with all the wonderful things he was doing. The Gospel of the Lord.
We're going to have something new today. Pastor Mark really is with us. He will be with us by way of electronics and technology.
Reading from Luke chapter 13.
Here you go. From the State Fair, not exactly live, but almost.
A reading from Luke chapter 13. Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." And when he laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which to work. That work ought to be done those days and be cured, but not on the Sabbath day." But Jesus answered him and said, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" And when he said all this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at the wonderful things that he was doing. Waiting. There's been a lot of waiting in lines here at the State Fair this weekend. There's some good crowds and some good food. Also, as we're here watching Jerson do his thing with showing his sheep, we've been waiting for his turn to come up for a couple of hours here and there, because his class is generally at the end of each show. So a lot of waiting. But the waiting thing is rather minimal, it's rather insignificant compared to what people in our world have to wait for, right? Many of our folks, whether that's waiting for good health care, or waiting for racial equality, or waiting for gender equality. So what does any of this have to do with today's text? Well, it would be a mistake to see the story about the woman with a debilitating spinal condition as just another healing story. It's so much more than that. It's about more than Jesus amazing the people with his power and frustrating the adversaries by healing on a day of rest. At the core of the story, it's a story about what God intends. It's a story about the urgency of what seeing God's intentions brought to reality without delay, without waiting. It's got to happen today. God's kingdom coming into the reality, into the here and now. The key to the story is Jesus' argument against the synagogue leader who opposes the healing of this woman on the Sabbath. It's not that he's against this man, is not against her healing. It's just that this woman's condition, it wasn't life-threatening. After all, she's had to live with it for nearly 2 decades. And so he's essentially saying, Jesus, sorry, no healing today. Just wait for the Sabbath to be over. Wait until tomorrow, because she could probably just live with it a little bit longer. And Jesus' response to this leader is as critical as it is clear. The Sabbath, along with any other tradition or any other teaching of the church for that matter, is absolutely no excuse for making people who are suffering to wait. No excuse for delaying from someone from experiencing wholeness. no excuse for standing up for someone who needs our help. So, here are a couple of questions for you to think about this week. Think of a time when you were particularly moved by someone else's suffering, whether that was someone's story of struggle that you listened to, that they shared with you, or experienced firsthand by someone or yourself being a victim of injustice. So the first question is, what would it look like for you to get involved in relieving that suffering? Either as you think about that experience that you once had with that, or if you are in a similar situation today or sometime in the future. The second question is, what in your own life makes you more likely to wait? To say, not today, rather than stand up and say, enough already. I gotta do something about this right now. Something for you to ponder this week. May God bless your week as we consider our own role in participating in God's healing and restoration in the world. Amen.